We have a very special guest here with us, Brett Watts.
So I just took on anybody that would take me money, and my mindset was whichever one I get the absolute best results for, that's the one I would go after.
When did that client acquisition kind of put into place? Like, when did that happen?
The first couple, I said, hey, I'll do it free, just cover ad spend. I just want the testimonial. So I actually went from like 20 or 25 to like 40 or 45 just by, doing the partnership.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Agency U, the Agency U podcast. We have a very special guest here with us, Brett Watts. He's a longtime agency owner. I think you mentioned like around 5 years. You had your
Yep.
agency. He built a patient Rhino to about close to just under 300K a month, sold his agency. And today we're going to be talking about what his agency journey was like. He's going to be sharing some of like the lessons that he's learned, talk about, the process of how he sold his agency. So we got an exciting one here today, man. I'm pumped to have you on, Brett.
Awesome. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome, man. So like, just kind of for the audience, like give them a bit of context on who Brett Watts is and tell us a little bit about like kind of the origin story of how it all got started, like how you got into the agency game. What did that look like?
Yeah, man. So if I were to go way back, I graduated college. I worked a couple years in a call center as a sales rep. So I actually sold like DirecTV, Verizon, Fios, a lot of telecommunications. It was just an inbound call center. And so all day, beep, next call, and then just back to back. So that's really where I got the foundation of sales. After that, I didn't know quite what I was going to do next. So I ended up actually going to Costa Rica and lived there, just went by myself, didn't know anybody. And I went for 5 months and actually did a thing called Workaway, where you basically work and volunteer. And so I worked 4 hours a day at this hostel, restaurant, and bar. And I got free living discount on all the food. And as I was checking a lot of people in, I'd say, hey, where are you from? How long you been traveling? And, I was shocked at how many people were like, yeah, I've been traveling for 6 months, been traveling for a year, been traveling for a year and a half.
Hmm.
And so I always ask, like, how can you do this? And the number one question that I got was, well, I work online, And so
Nice.
when I go back and I'm just like Googling how to make money online, and I looked at like surveys and forums and,
Yeah.
all kind of e-commerce and all kind of stuff. And so I'm researching this quite a bit. I come home back to the States after 5 months and I get another sales job, but this one's cold calling and I hated it. And I was really good. I was actually top producer at the other job doing inbound, but the outbound, the manager
Oh,
wasn't very supportive, but regardless, I just like really hated it. And so as I'm still thinking, how do I work online? I actually get targeted by ads by Dan Henry, which is preaching hey, you can build this ad, slap it up for, a year and not even really touch it and just touch base with the client once a month, right? Comes to find
yeah.
out after that's totally not true.
Yeah.
I got sold the dream and the vision and, just had to adapt. And so that's basically, how it started. And I originally started with social media management, actually. So doing posts
Yeah.
on Instagram and Facebook and, I could charge like $350 per client. And then something stupid cheap like that, and then they want to leave, and I had no proof at all that anything that I was doing was actually producing real revenue. I couldn't track it, and so I started thinking, something's got to happen, and so bought Dan Henry's course for like $2,000. I was super hesitant because I'd never bought a course like myself before, and so I start finding out who his students are, and I'm like DMing them, hey, I don't have a lot of money, I just spend it all in Costa Rica. Should I invest in this? And overall, the feedback was really great. And thank God I did, because, it changed my life and it opened the doors to, new opportunity, and had a ton of headache and frustration and waking up at 2 a.m., worried about things. And, there was a lot of bumpy roads within it, but, once you kind of figure some things out, it was, it's an incredible journey.
And what
Nice,
does
yeah.
patient Rhino do?
So Patient Rhino, we work specifically with medical spas. And so
Okay, cool.
basically we're their number one producer for generating leads, appointments, and sales. And so we primarily focused on social media advertising like Facebook, Instagram,
Yeah.
dabbled in some TikTok, but basically lead generation.
Okay.
And then we started to realize that just generating leads actually doesn't work with retention either. And so things have evolved over the last 5 or 6 years in the agency space. I used to just zap it into a Google spreadsheet, send a text message, and that was it.
Yeah.
Right? But unfortunately, leads don't always equate to appointments, and leads don't always equate into sales, right? And so we started noticing that, our retention was taking a hit. And so we had to fix more and more problems along the way. And whether it was helping convert the leads, helping schedule the leads, helping the staff know how to actually run the consultation correctly to increase their close rate, just all kind of stuff. And so it became more of a, instead of just a lead generation, we really emphasized the education aspect of it. And so we had a doctor on our staff that, had 2 clinics of his own. He ended up exiting those as well. And so, we just had a full support system. So
My wife is an aesthetic nurse, and I'm always curious because I feel like a lot of agencies get into the med spa space. Was that like from the jump? Like that was like med spa is the way to go. That was what I wanted to do. Or did you test out a bunch of niches, or how'd you land on that?
yeah, good question. Honestly, man, I sign anybody that would pay me money.
Yeah.
And my philosophy was, I just need to practice. Sure, you can do a course, but until you actually start doing it, right, it's totally different. You start to see different situations come up. How do you do those? And, once you start seeing the data of, cost per lead and, all the other things. And so I just took on anybody that would take me money. And my mindset was, whichever one I get the absolute best results for, that's the one I want to go after. And my mom's actually a nurse practitioner. And she called me that her office wants to do an aesthetic event. And so this was by MERS Aesthetics. So they do ZMM, think of Botox and, some other skin tightening and lip filler and those kind of things. And so I promoted an event, and I already had previous experience doing events and, just crushed it for them. And so the rep that was there with this company asked the doctor, who promoted it, because they were really impressed. And so she ended up speaking with my mom, and then we got connected, and she said, hey, I have other clinics. I want you to do their event. And then she also started spreading the news to other reps that are in different states and different parts of the state. And so it kind of just took off without even really trying to go after it. So it kind of just fell in my lap. And it got to the point that I was getting so many referrals that we just told our other clients that, hey guys, after 30 days, we're going to finish this out. But we're going to focus explicitly with med spas.
Good for you. Super cool story.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, it was mostly like word of mouth referrals, like that. That's how you initially got the first med spa clients. And then at what point was it like where you started to ramp up like the client acquisition? Like, did you do like cold email, like ads? Like when did that client acquisition kind of put into place? Like when did that happen?
Yeah, so that was from like 5 to like 20 maybe, but to get from 0 to 1, honestly, I just leveraged my contacts on my phone, and I just messaged people, and I said, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Who do you know that restaurants, dentists, chiropractors, and I just listed that is looking for this. And so that's how I landed the first couple, was just going through my contacts on my phone and just messaging friends.
Starting with the network. Yeah.
And the first couple, I said, hey, I'll do it for free, just cover ad spend. I just want the testimonial. And honestly, that's the easiest way, because you really need practice in the case studies anyway. So so that's how I got from 0 to 1. Then from like 5 to 20, it was mainly the referrals from like this kind of med spa sales rep. After that, I hired my first 2 virtual assistants. In fact, they were with me for 5 years. They actually exited and were part of the sale. So they were my first 2 employees, and they stayed with me the entire time, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so they were doing prospecting. So we did Instagram DMs, Facebook DMs, and cold email. And then one of the VAs was a campaign builder. So anytime I would close a client, we had a checklist where he would build the campaign. And then when I didn't have campaigns to build, his secondary role was more prospecting. So a lot of cold email, a lot of Instagram DMs. And and that was like my first real heavy prospecting method.
And where did that take you? So it was 5 to 20 was like the referrals from the med spa rep, and then 20, was that like 20 to 40, or what was that next step in your client acquisition?
So around October of 2019, I went to Breckenridge, Colorado with a mastermind group that I was a part of. And I had been talking with another guy that was also part of this group, and we were both med spas. And so we shared ad copy, we shared a lot of resources. In fact, I introduced him to my media buyer, who I was using, a white label guy. So this same guy was running our ads, and he was running my friend's ads, who's also in the med spa niche. And so typically you're competitors, but we just shared a lot.
Yeah.
And one of our mentors was like, guys, you should really consider partnering. You're at like the same, we're both around like 20, 25 clients at the time. And so we agreed to do a 90-day trial. And if it worked out, we would sign the dotted line and it was official. And if it didn't work out, anything that we acquired over that 90 days, we would just split in half and, go off our own ways, and agreed to still stay friends. But, no harm, no foul, let's try it. And so we tried it. And so I actually went from like 20 or 25 to like 40 or 45 just by, doing the partnership. So that's really,
what was that partnership like? Was it like you're doing ops, he's doing sales, or like what's the clarity there? Because I talk to a lot of people who are, especially like younger agencies, who are just getting going, and they feel like, oh, if I get this partner, it's really going to help me and it's going to get me to XYZ. And I'm always a little hesitant to be like, cool, yeah, do it, for sure. Like this person just sees what you're doing and they're all of a sudden like, oh, I want to be a part of it. What can I do? So what was that like for you, out of curiosity, since we're on that point?
the first 30 or 60 days was probably a little bit rusty. It was also probably a little bit of aggravation from time to time because we were stepping on each other's toes. I'd say, hey, I'm going to do something. And then sometimes he'd do it and vice versa. And then from there, it was like, all right, this is obvious. We've got to come with more structure, right? And so we just said, hey, here's the line. If I need help, if I need feedback, you give it. I need you to trust me and vice versa. But anything over there, unless we ask for help or feedback or anything from, now that doesn't mean if I say, see something, I can't be like, man, just wondering why you decided to go that route, right? We can always challenge each other's and, try to look at different angles and perspectives. But what helped us was really just doing a line and say, so for us, it was once that sale is made and the cash actually hits Stripe, then it switches to me. So he was everything front end, so sales and marketing. And then I was everything on the back end. So once the sale was made, what is the very first step that takes place with that, right? Do we send text messages and emails? Do we schedule an onboarding call? Do they need an onboarding form? Like that was all for kind of me to figure out. And so I was kind of the back end fulfillment operations guy. And then the other guy was more of the visionary. He was more of the one running ads, and his was kind of, he was more of the face because he was in charge of the marketing. And then I'm just kind of the guy in the background that my only job is to make sure that just things are running smoothly. So I oversaw the account managers, the fulfillment team, the virtual assistants, pretty much anything that was not, B2B marketing or sales.
Nice.
And that worked really well for us.
Kind of like how me and Gilberto are set up too.
Yeah,
right
yeah, that's usually the route. One guy's sales, one guy's back end.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And for you, like, when did that happen when you like, because I know you're huge, when we talked about like you had a lot of stuff that you learned on like just operation systems and all that stuff. So like now that you guys like partnered, when you guys partnered, like what did that look like in terms of like operations at that point, like systems that needed to be built out? Like what did that look like?
Honestly, man, so he had done a good bit of paid ads. I had never done paid ads before. I had an account manager. He did not have an account manager. We both had the same media buyer. So there were things that I had that he didn't have and vice versa. But when I initially built, the company and the operations and the systems and processes and everything from there, right? It was really built to take on, a client a week, maybe. And so when we really divided and figured out our roles, our entire system and backend just broke. And so we ramped up ads. We said, hey, there's no budget. Let's just spend and see what happens. And, we took on, I forgot how many the first time, but things just broke and we couldn't fulfill fast enough. It was a week or 2 weeks till we could even go live, and clients started questioning it. We had some refund requests because we weren't live yet. And it just, looked completely unprofessional. And so it's a good thing that happened because we had to go back to the drawing board and say, all right, this process of like, hey, we'll go live in 7 days no longer is acceptable. We have to remove any barrier of entry and friction And the longer you wait, the more time that you allow for buyer's remorse. And essentially just thinking on it, sleeping on it on night, talking it over and saying, you know what, I thought about it. We're not live yet. I'd like to stop. And so we completely rebuilt, the way that we onboard clients and the processes and what can we automate, what needs to be manual, what are the steps, who do we need to assign that to, who can we, delegate it to, what is the due date, and what happens after each step from there. And then we got to the point that once we signed a client, assuming they filled out the onboarding form and, just a couple small things we needed, we could be live in 24 hours. And so we just completely productized it, where these are the images and these are the ads for these services. This is exactly what we're using. Here's the template. We built a master campaign in Facebook. So all we had to do was import it like a CSV file and then change the custom values. Same images, same everything. And then we had like 9 or 16 different variations. So, you start with some, and those are the best performing ones that we had tested across the US. And then eventually you can turn one off and switch the next campaign on, and they were already pre-built. And so we could go live, very, very fast. And so it's a good thing that happened, because we completely, changed the way that we, onboarded clients. And that was a huge game changer for us.
Yeah, one of the important points you brought up is like the productizing of your offer, but like also productizing of your service. Like basically a lot of the things that I see with like agency owners that are probably around like 0 to even sometimes like 20 is the hesitation to like niche down. Is like one of the biggest things, kind of like, like keeping them from getting to the next level. I always have like certain analogies I use, but I'm always curious to know, like, if you can share with the audience kind of like why you decided to niche down to really scale up with your partner.
Yeah. So at first, before the partnership, I had a landscaper, I had a residential cleaning company, I had a Thai restaurant, I had, I don't even remember, but completely
Thai restaurant. That's interesting.
right? Well, I used to work at the Thai restaurant. So that's one thing I skipped my story, is that when I quit that cold calling job, I didn't want to just quit because I spent so much money in Costa Rica, basically just partying the whole time, that I needed something. So I worked part-time at a restaurant, and the other part-time was studying Dan Henry's course. And so I convinced the manager, because I was working there, like, hey, let me do this. And it worked really well. And it was actually pretty funny. There were times I'd get a table, they'd come in with a coupon, and I'd be like, I made that ad. And that was, that was like a highlight. And so I loved every time that happened. And so it was not only harder because you really need to understand the lingo, right? Like in our industry, do they call them customers? Do they call them clients? Do they say patients? Just sometimes if you say the wrong word, they instantly know this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, because we don't use that language, right? And so 100%. I came across that happening several times. And so not only is it harder for me or the account manager to understand everything, but from a media buying perspective, every single ad had to be completely rebuilt. And when we say a campaign, it's not just the ad. You've got to do variations of the ads. You've got to do ad copy, the ad page. You've got to do the landing page. You've got to do the thank you page. You've got to do what's stated on the calendar. You've got to say what comes in the opt-in text message campaign. You've got to do the emails. Well, what happens when they book an appointment? Now you got to do those emails and text messages, right? And so it's a whole process. And at the time, nobody on our team could do that except me. I couldn't have, my virtual assistants run that. My account manager, her job was just to do, speak to clients. She had never ran ads before, right? And so every time we did this, I got dragged into the business, having to do something else that was, sure, it was needed, but it really shouldn't be the owner who's the one doing that. And so we had to productize it in order to do that. And not only do we have to productize and say, hey, we're only taking on this one vertical. The problem with the medical spa niche, and other industries are like this as well, is there's always a new shiny object. There's always a new machine. There's a new device. There's a new laser. There's a new injectable. There's a new body contouring machine, right? And so they'd come to us and say, hey, we got this new machine. We want to switch to this. So then now I'm in the same circle and I'm repeating, even though I switched to one industry, I'm constantly having to create it. So we eventually got to the point that we said, hey, these are the 5 treatments we promote. We don't do anything else. And so we probably lost some money because not only did new prospective clients want us to do something and we said no to, which was very hard, by the way, but not only that, we probably lost some active clients because they wanted one marketer to do everything. And there were times that we said no. But
Yeah.
as a result of that, instead of just being okay or good at 25, 50 different campaigns, we got really freaking good at 5. And so now, because we got so good at it, we got better results, we got better leads. We figured out how can we convert a lead to an appointment? How can we get that appointment to actually show up? And then those that do show up, how can we convert those to actual dollars where they're paying it out? And then not only how can we convert them to dollars, but how can we get into a SIN, into a bigger package where hopefully our goal is one customer. If we can bring them, we'll pay for our entire monthly service. And so that's what we then started to shift to, is how can we get them to say, hey, even if you sold one customer, at minimum, you'd break even, where it'd be a no-brainer that you'd continue. And so our retention rate really skyrocketed after that.
I think that's huge. I think the other big thing that you were hitting on is like understanding the customer and like the lingo and stuff, which I think is so valuable as you're niching down, because that scales trust and it builds your authority as an agency owner, which makes the sale so much easier versus like just being an order taker. You're the consultant who knows the best practices. And when you're saying that stuff and you have the results to prove it and you can speak the lingo, it's like, boom, like, of course I'm going to hire this person because it's an absolute no-brainer. I'm
100%.
curious about, so like you partnered up with your partner, like obviously you sold your agency. Was the intention, like when starting the agency, like, hey, I'm going to sell this thing, or I just want to scale this thing up and make it a cash flow thing? Or like, what were the early conversations like around that? Because that's a big deal. And it's also something that you don't decide like later in many instances, as you probably are aware, just of like the logistics. Like, did it happen pretty early when you're like, hey, we're going to scale this bad boy up and flip it?
It was never part of the conversation.
No kidding.
Not even, we never even considered it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Early on, obviously. Yeah. We just said, hey, we like this. It's fun working together. Let's just scale it to as much as we can. And, it wasn't until later that, we both do a little bit of real estate. Like we both own, a few Airbnbs. And so he really wanted to shift more into that. And, I was kind of okay to also look at the next big thing that kind of lights me up, right? And you just do the same, I've been doing it for 6 years. And so, although it was a great, kind of cash cow for us, it just didn't light me up anymore. It was just one of those things that like, although I was pretty removed, like, we had 3 account managers and a team lead above them. We had a team of media buyers. We had a sales team and a setter team. And so I didn't talk to clients. I didn't take sales calls. It really got to the point that I only needed to do about 10 hours in the business. But still, I think we just wanted the next big thing that, we can actually come and be like, dude, I am stoked to do this today. And we just kind of lost a little bit of that flair.
Interesting.
And so it wasn't until then that we were like, hey, do we just want to keep it going and work on other projects and like it's just there in the back end? Or should we just try to exit it where like we can go all in on the next thing and not have this be a distraction, even if it's minimal time?
Super interesting, because it seems like how you built it was very structured to make it a sellable agency, meaning it was like very ops focused, like you're working yourself out of the business. And it seems like you almost built it with that intention, but it was not at all.
It wasn't so much. Honestly, what really helped is about 1.5 years before we exited the company, I paid somebody to do a third party audit of our company. And so, it's similar to a home inspection. So when I bought my house, we have an inspection that's done. They talk about the roof, the electrical, the water, the flooring, everything, right? And so it's kind of the same thing. And so we paid somebody third party to come in. And oftentimes as owners and in the day-to-day, you're so in the weeds that you don't even look from 30,000 feet above to actually see that one of the problems can be right there in front of you. And so at the time of this, it's funny, she actually called it the Brett Amber Vortex. And so Amber was a CSM. She was our first one. She went with the company. She's the COO of it now. And she's basically runs the entire day-to-day of the business still. And so she called it the Brett Amber Vortex, which essentially meant that the business, if Brett and Amber were to step out, even though we have good processes, like things would break. And so the team was hesitant to do certain things on their own because we don't give them the autonomy and the freedom and the guidance on how to make the decisions, where if they asked a question, we just always gave them the answer. Versus instead of always giving the answer, challenging them to say, well, what would you feel best in this situation? Right. And so that was a huge light bulb for me, because it was so difficult to go on vacation. Even though, you know, because when I said we were removed, this was much later in the time, right? This wasn't, you know, in the earlier days of it, even after our partnership. And so, you know, with this audit, it really opened my eyes up of like, man, this business is so reliant and dependable on not only the two owners, but also, you know, our like head CSM or team lead at the time. And so we had to then restructure it where, okay, what are the questions we're getting? Do we have that process documented? So then we shifted super heavily, although we already had some processes and like SOPs and, you know, how-tos all documented. You know, when we had the audit done, there were so many in there using Asana, and we had switched to Monday like 8 months after that, right? And so it was so outdated that was one of the big shifts that we had, was how can we document everything? And if they ask a question, instead of answering it, how can we lead them to actually find the answer? And then once they did it, our job is to only provide feedback and not, you know, say, hey, yes, I agree, or maybe challenge their belief. Hey, you know, have you actually thought about it from this angle? Right. But still not giving them the answer. And so once we shifted to that and then documenting everything, you know, this is when my time actually got to be more free, where I could focus on other things because I was so in the day to day.
Yeah, you mentioned something interesting.
Then it became a sellable asset.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned something interesting just now, like basically teaching them how to think. It's like essentially like that's literally what leadership is. It's like building other leaders. Because I remember like when when I kind of started doing that, it was almost like kind of frightening, because then like what you said, like it's hard to take like vacations like as you're scaling up. And like when I started like really like challenging them, like, hey, what would you do in this situation or whatever, when we had our meetings, that's where things were like really became a little hands off. And then they started to kind of like see their department as like, all right, I'm in charge of this. And you're like kind of like bringing them up like, hey, this section of the agency like belongs to you. Like you're the owner of this. And then that's where things like become hands off. So it sounds like you've done that did you do that for like your closer setter team, and like for the media buying and all that stuff, like that same process? Or what did that look like for really making all the departments like just autonomous?
Yeah, you know, we were all guilty of it. There were times that, you know, my partner, if a sales guy messaged him in Slack and said, hey, I need help, he would hop on the call and he'd close the sale. Right. He eventually said, no, we've talked about this. You need to dig deeper. You need to figure out why they're on the call in the first place. Where are they at? Where do they want to be? You need to paint the picture. And so he stopped doing that. And so I started doing the same thing, where, you know, if there was a client escalation, you know, it would escalate to me and they'd say, hey, can you hop on this call? Well, what happens with that is I'm in the middle of something. So not only does my workflow just completely get interrupted, but now I have to go save the day because I couldn't have them do it anyway, you know? And so, yeah, we did it for the media buy. I mean, every department, you know, every person. And it was just quit giving them the answers. And instead, as leaders, our job is to not just give them the answers, but give them the mindset of how they can actually be resourceful in order to figure out on their own.
Yeah, it's kind of like doing coaching, but for like your internal team of like how to think, like building them up as leaders. 100%. What are like the infrastructures you feel like are necessary? Like if you redid like the whole journey over again and your end intention was to like sell the agency and you had to start all over again, like what are the like frameworks, infrastructures you would put in place, like the pillars that you would build to like do it faster this time?
Man, that's a great question. Yeah. So if I were to start from ground zero again and build my own agency, number one, you know, if I had the funds, I would hire A players right off the bat, just to help speed up that process even more. If I didn't have that, then that's okay. Number one, I would start doing data pretty much immediately. So I would track everything in regards of how many calls did I take? What was our show rate? What was our close rate? What was our retention rate? You know, I would track everything where then I can make the educated decisions in order to identify the real bottlenecks in my business. Next, I would immediately start with an SOP library and just start building out exactly what to do, both written and video, on here are the steps, here's how to do it, and here's an example of me doing it. So then I could immediately start delegating to somebody else in order to do the day-to-day tasks that need to be done, but shouldn't always be done as the owner. Next, after that, I would just start hiring. And then I would build a really good product that, instead of just building a product of what I believe that our audience wants, I would actually do the research and ask them and do a survey. Gilberto, I think you filled out my survey, right? Even my new company, I asked, hey, what's your goal with this? What's the roadblock in the way of that goal? What would be your fear of doing this? What would you want to learn, and what would be stopping you? You know, questions like that. And then my job here is just look for patterns and trends of what are their goals, what are their objections, and what's preventing them from doing so. And then, as finding the patterns of that, I would then build a product that actually solves that problem. And the bigger the problem, the bigger the price tag you can actually charge for it. Yeah. Right. And so I would really do a lot of research on, number one, who is my audience? What do they want to achieve? What's preventing them from doing so? And then I would just base my product around that and have a kick-ass product. And I would constantly do feedback with my clients. Check-in calls, onboarding calls, offboarding calls are absolutely crucial. In order to constantly ask, how can we improve? And if you were to look for anything that could enhance this, what would that be? And then I would try to deliver on that, while being, you know, I would also be niche again versus just, you know, kind of broad.
Yeah.
Can we hit on something specific? So the first thing that you said was I would hire A players. How do you define that? How do you find people that are A players? What does that look like for you? Because I know that's a huge thing, because we're in a service-based business, meaning we're not just selling a product, shipping it. It's like we have to deliver something, and that requires human capital. So what does that look like for you, especially for somebody maybe who's just getting going, maybe has one hire or two hires? What would you look for?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I always did was hire for culture, not for skill. Right now, that doesn't mean now. I think it was shifted a little bit, especially now that, you know, I may have the funds to be able to just get somebody right off the bat. And, you know, an employee is not an expense, even though it may say that on, your P&L, but really it's an investment, right? And so you're investing in somebody that can help speed up the process way faster than what you could on your own. Yeah. And so for me, we have really good hiring funnels that anytime somebody applies, we ask a series of questions, on that. Some of them are just about character, right? It's what motivates you. Is it money? Is it growth? Is it personal development? Is it, whatever it may be. And then basically, as we're going through, we have these filters that if they answer some of these questions, they get passed on to the next stage. So we have automations. We use Jotform to basically ask the questions, and then we set up automations that go into high level as a pipeline, as the opportunity stages. And so if they answer a certain thing, they go to one stage. And then they basically get a message, which is saying, hey, thanks for completing step 1 of your application. In order to be considered for the next, you've got to complete step 2. Nice. Step 2 is a 3-minute Loom video. And so the Loom video is who are you, where are you from, right? And it's based on what you've read about this job description. What's the number one problem that you feel that you can solve and you can add value to? And so you'll get some really kind of creatives from there. And so we'd ask a couple more questions. But again, 3 minutes is really what we're looking for. What we noticed is that when we ran ads on Indeed, which is where we hired, say if we got 100 applications on Indeed, we would then funnel them to the next step, which is the Jotform. Jotform would probably be 20 questions, right? Yeah. Out of those 100 on Indeed, we probably have 70 that fill out the Jotform. Out of the 70 that filled out a Jotform, we'd have 25 that actually sent the Loom video. So now not only are we filtering by specific questions of things that are, an absolute necessity for us, but we've got to make sure that they're committed and they like the job enough that they're going to do everything from there. What we also do is we would do some little tests in there just to see if they followed simple instructions. No. And so we would say, hey, in order to submit your video, we really prefer a Loom video, but you can drop the link here. So if they did a Google Drive link, if they did a Dropbox, guess what? We don't even watch it. We would also say, when you do the Loom video, instead of doing and sharing your screen, make sure that you're only showing yourself. Right. And so now when I click the Loom, if I see the screen next, so now instead of those 25 Loom videos, I'm really down to 10, maybe that actually instructions. And so now it's these are the people that not only took the effort which most jobs don't ask you to do a video, right? I get it. It's kind of uncomfortable, but if you want it, you know, this is what it is. And so we would also have these small little things. And if they couldn't pay attention to the minor detail, then we know if they can't do that in a job, you know, posting to
Yeah.
hire, then
100%.
it's just something that you're going to do. So even something as simple as change the view on the loom, you know, you were immediately disqualified.
That's money.
And
Yeah, I think they show up. I was gonna say that like who you're seeing on that interview is like that's the best. They're showing up with their best face forward. Like that's literally the best you're gonna get. So even
Yeah.
like the small details, like it magnifies
Yeah.
that small thing that they didn't do. Like that's how they're gonna be probably worse during the
Big time. Yeah. So we would do these small things, and then from there, on the interview, we would ask questions, you know, for any of our like real roles, which is CSMs or sales.
Mm.
You know, we would have them overcome objections on the interview.
Yeah.
You know, the CSM is a sales role. The number one job of the CSM is to increase lifetime value. Where how do you do that? Number one, you've got to keep them longer. So if they want to leave, you got to sell them on why to stay. And number two, in order to increase stickiness, you've got to sell them more products that solve more problems. You got to sell. And so our CSM role, I mean, it was in the application, it was in the interview, it was in the questions, and we drilled them on overcoming this. Well, what about that? I got to talk to my wife. And on the interview, they're over here overcoming objections. And so sales was a huge thing that we hired for, and pretty much any role that was client facing at all. And as a result of that, you know, we just scaled so much quicker, not only on the front end, but the back end as well. And so having somebody that's sharp at sales, but actually enjoys it, right? Not just like, yeah, I'm okay, you know, fine. If you want me to sell it, I'll sell it, right? It's like, we want someone that's like motivated by that. Like that's a huge thing we look for.
Were we mostly like onshore employees, offshore, or what was kind of the mix of that?
Yeah, we was a mix of both. Anything client facing was US based. My goal with the company was that I don't have to speak to clients. And so really, I'm no longer the face of the company. It's whoever their direct CSM or account manager is, their coach.
Cool.
So we really needed someone that, you know, could give off this, you know, speak with confidence, be ready, understand again, even just the lingo, because all of our clients are US, plus our clientele are medical spas, which some of these were pretty luxury.
Sure.
Right. And so we work with plastic surgeons as well, right? So if you're going to have somebody that, you know, maybe, you know, broken Wi-Fi or not a good background, or, you know, even sometimes a bad accent, right? People, unfortunately, whether you like it or not, you know, they judge a book by its cover. And for our audience, we just didn't think that was best. Now there's other industries that you go after and they don't care at all.
Yeah.
Right. But ours, you know, we felt that was important. So our media buyer was in Canada. All of our CSMs, we had 3 CSMs and 1 team lead. They were all in the US. Our sales guys were in the US. Actually, one was also in Canada. Now we went through a lot of reps over the, you know, years, but most of them were in the US.
What did that org chart, at that level, like before selling, what did that look like? Because you mentioned like team leads as well. And a couple other things. Like what did the org chart look like for your agency?
Yeah, so with my partner, it was basically, he was the head of marketing and head of sales. And so he had, you know, several closers under him, and then he had setters under them. For B2B, for our client acquisition on how we grew our agency, that's the only thing that we really outsourced. And we had another company that, you know, could do it, even though we knew how to do it. You know, these guys, you know, had it hooked up with Hyros, so they had, you know, much better data with tracking. They also did our Google ads, YouTube ads, TikTok ads, Facebook ads, you know, you name it. They pretty much did it all, right? And so now we had more of an omnipresence by having that. So that was, you know, his side. My side was pretty much me. Underneath me was a team lead. She was a CSM for years with me before. And then under her were 3 CSMs. So
would that team lead be more of like an ops manager? No?
You know, a little bit, but she wasn't doing so much with like building the processes or the automations and that kind of stuff. So although it was kind of like, yes, she was the one operating the business, she wasn't the one designing, hey, like when someone pays, this is what happens, right? That was more me. I was like the engineer kind of in the background, just piecing it together. And anytime the CSM was either out, they got stuck, it went to her. Then eventually, like, I basically said, like, you guys can't message me anymore. She's your escalation only. Amber can message me if she gets stuck. And so now I only report to one person versus, the whole team.
Yeah.
She also not only oversaw the CSMs, but also our media buyers and our VAs as well. So our VAs would do anywhere from, they'd be the first person to reply to our support email. We had a ton of canned replies, so they could just choose a template. Obviously, you can tweak it if you need to. If they didn't know how to do it, we used Freshdesk. They would just assign it to the right CSM, and then a Slack notification would automatically tag them. Hey, you were assigned to this ticket. Go check it out once you can. The only thing that I really did to support the team, which was a huge game changer, and I'd recommend any owner, is that I realized there were still times that, some of the teams still wanted a little bit of my advice. And when I stripped that away, they kind of still wanted to ask me questions from time to time. So even though I said, go to this person, they would still send me Slack messages, right? And so what I did was, a couple of days a week, I'd have office hours, which is at 3 p.m. It's an optional call. I'll be in the Zoom. If you have a question, come in there. And there'd be some days where I'd sit in the Zoom and just work and nobody would show up. And there'd be times where, maybe 3 people would show up and they'd have questions. You can ask the question, you can get out. But as a result of that, I no longer get all the Slack messages because they would just say, hey, I actually meet with our team later today. Is it okay if I get back to you? And no clients, ever going to say no to that.
Yeah.
Right. So if they didn't know what to do, they would either ask our team lead or they would just wait for office hours if it was that day of the week. And, I'm there, and it was an optional call, and it was great. I no longer got all the questions and the distractions. I just, hey, if you need questions,
Way to do it.
no longer ask, just come to this call and I'm here for you. And so that was really big.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm super curious to know, like, for you, like, the way I kind of look at it, and this is what I'd really like to, I'm curious to know from your agency journey. I think there's lessons that you learn from like others, and just lessons that you learn that just naturally come up. You, like, as you make so many reps, you kind of learn certain things, but then there are lessons that are learned the hard way. And like those you never forget, like you just like will never make the mistake again. What are some of those hard lessons in your agency that came from like, just mess ups that, bit you in the back end, and like, just really were tough pills to swallow? And yeah, so what were lessons like that came from your 6 years of your agency?
I try to look at every failure as a learning experience. I know that's kind of cliche, but the biggest thing is I would offload more off of my task, off of my plate way quicker. And so there's so many times that we have the mindset and the belief that nobody can do it as good as me. But even if you have somebody 80% of what you are, then imagine that time. Imagine if it's only 5 hours a week, right? Of, say, running the ads for the clients, or, for B2B, whatever it may be, right? If I'm good at sales, 5 hours, that's at least 5 demos. And I know that me being the owner and good at sales, I can probably close 30, 35, maybe 40% of anyone from there. So now if I take that 5 from just doing tedious tasks and I focus that on what's actually a high revenue generating activity, like maybe the sales calls, then I'm adding more money to our bottom and top line pretty much all the time. So I would, number one, I would delegate way sooner. And I would get over the belief that nobody can do it as good as me. And even if they do it 80%, if that can be 80% multiplied in multiple departments all over the business, that's 80 times, 80% more faster than what I can, because I can only do one thing at a time. Yeah. So delegation would be one. And then the other, we talked on briefly already, but it's quit giving all the team the answers. And I would challenge them by knowing, here's the goal that we're looking for. The data, the KPIs. If you're not at KPI for this metric, here are the things that you can do in order to enhance that. And then eventually they can look at the data and they actually know the problem before even telling you. And so one of our core values was be solution oriented. And if you ever come to us with a problem, and I'd get mad at this at times, if they say, hey, this thing's messed up, it's okay. Well, what are you proposing? Are you just going to sit here and say, here's all the problems and point out all the flaws? Or are you going to say, hey, this is it. This is what I propose. And this is what I think we should do. And so if someone came to us with a problem, like, we would get pissed if they didn't have a solution with it. Even if it's not the best solution, just think of something of what you can do. And then we need to challenge them to say, hey, that's great. Have you considered this other angle? And so I would quit giving them all the answers and I would challenge them in order to figure it out. And by doing so, you can't SOP everything. There's always a unique situation, but by challenging them to do that, they'll then register, okay, I haven't done this before, but I know this other thing was a little bit similar, and they'll start doing the decisions for you. So then now you can focus on the things that either you enjoy, higher revenue generating activities, or whatever it is that's actually going to grow the business the most. So those would be a couple of things for sure.
This is super
Wow.
solid. I'm getting so much. This is so much value. We have a couple minutes left. I would love for you to close out and just kind of talk about like the journey of selling and maybe some like nuggets that you like pulled from that. Cause I think a lot of agency owners don't build an agency with the intention of selling. They have no idea that they can even sell an agency or how to even begin that process or what to do, but would love to kind of hear your story of how that came about and
Sure.
the process of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So really there's a few things that every buyer is going to want to have, right? Number one is any buyer is going to want to see the math. They're going to want to see the data. So I would track everything immediately off the bat. And what's interesting is when you create it with the intention, even though that wasn't my sole intention at the beginning, we started doing it from there. And so if you actually build it to sell, naturally you're building it to scale significantly faster because you're then focusing on the product, you're focusing on the systems, the processes in order to have it where the business isn't so dependent on you. And when it's dependent on you, you can never get away because you're always going to be pulled in and you feel that you're going to constantly be trying to, fix one fire after the next versus building the team, the foundation, and everything from there. And so really a few things that any buyer is going to want to look at. And it does depend on the agency, right? SEO is going to be different than Facebook ads, going to be different than content, right? There's different variables from there. But, the one that I was in, which is more lead generation, few things that buyers really want to know is number one, in no particular order, but is most of the revenue you're generating, is it recurring based or is it one time? So for us, we had, at least 90-day commitments to anybody that signed with us. And then we would try to upsell them to a 6 or 12 month once that was done. So ours was very recurring versus like websites. You build it one time and then it's done, right? They're also going to want to know anybody that would not be going with the sell of the business, say like the owners, for example, what is their day-to-day role? How much hours are they committing into a week? And what are the tasks that they are doing? And are any of those tasks either focused on getting clients or fulfilling clients? If so, now they're going to feel like they're coming in buying a job, because if you're the guy taking all the sales calls, guess what? They're the new owners who has to take the sales call. They either have to hire someone from scratch or they have to do it themselves. So anybody that's leaving, what are they doing? And is it dependent? And do you have that with a system or a team that's already fulfilling that? They're also going to want to know not only how much money you made, but what are the net margins from there, especially, if you were before any add backs. So before like distributions or traveling and things that aren't always essential for the business. Those are a few things as well. And then is there any leadership team in place? What do they do? What are they paid? How long have they been with you? Tenure was a big one. Our newest hire was like a year and a half. So everybody that was going with us had been with us a minimum of a year. And so the buyers, they're looking at risk assessment. And so do you have people that have been with you for 60 days, or have they been with you a while? So that was really a confidence level for them. And then let's say the leadership does leave, because even though they say they're staying with the owner, right? Nobody can force them to stay. If they do leave, what's going to happen? And so what was really reassuring for our owner is that, hey, even if this leadership does leave, we have everything in every department documented. How to create a calendar, how to set a demo, how to close a deal, how to run the ad, how to split test, right? And so we had just done a really good job of documenting it, where you could go in our SOP library, search a keyword or filter by software, and you would see everything pop up.
Yeah.
And so
was yours like a did you pursue selling, or did someone pursue you? And then was it like private equity, or was it like another agency, or what was like your specific situation?
Yeah, good question. So, I told you a little bit, we were just kind of, looking for the next big thing that lights us up, essentially. So I was actually at an event of Cole Gordon's. We were in his, 8-figure boardroom, and one of the speakers that was speaking there was talking about you should always be sellable. and just list your business, and you'll never know. You always say in your dream home, you never want to move, and then someone knocks on the door with a big paycheck that you can't resist.
Sure.
And you never know if that can happen with yours, even if you don't have an intention to sell. So I actually, waved him down after he spoke, went and talked to him, set up a call, ended up interviewing like 6 or 7 other brokers, went with the one that I felt was going to be best. And within 4 months, we from the time I signed the broker, so the first month I tried it on my own.
Yeah.
I looked on Google of agencies. I contacted them and asked, if competitors were maybe interested. Called friends that I knew that maybe, didn't get any bites from. So from the time we signed the broker to getting money in the bank was 4 months. So we had a pretty quick exit.
That's quick.
And it's just, we had a lot of the things built in a way that it lowered the risk assessment, right?
Wow.
And so, the buyer felt pretty confident with it. And so,
was it a bigger agency? Was it private equity? Was it?
Yeah, he did own another agency, but it was completely different. He was more blue collar, so think of like home services, and he did websites and SEO.
Interesting.
Well, we don't do websites or SEO. We just did, basically Facebook ad lead generation with, coaching backend. And so, he already knew a little bit of it, but his intention is actually to buy several of them and do a roll up.
Okay, makes sense.
So I know he's put in 2 other offers for 2 other agencies at least. He did get outbid on both of those, but his intention is to buy multiple small agencies that are doing, probably 2 to 5 million a year, buy a few of those and then sell for, 20 million, 30 million, something like that. So
makes the multiple larger as the EBITDA goes up. And then as far as like your role, like, are you still in the business, or what's like that look like?
No, I'm completely out.
Nice.
If I say, hey, if you guys have questions and you don't know, text me. It's all small. I mean, it's pretty rare, but if they do, I don't mind supporting because I really want to see them succeed, right? And so I'm completely out of that now. And so now I have a new business called the Sellable Agency, and my mission for there is pretty simple. It's just to help agency owners build a business that can actually amplify your life versus controlling it. And so there was so much time that, when I had my agency, that I'd wake up in the middle of the night. I couldn't go on vacation. I was stressing about things, right? And it was so hard to have the freedom to do the things that I actually wanted to do, because I built the business in a way that it controlled me. And so now it's to help amplify it, to help give them the freedom by having the knowledge, the systems, the people, the processes, where now it doesn't have to rely on them, where they don't feel like they're constantly putting out fires, but they can also trust in the system and the team that they built, where they know that their quality of the service won't take a drop either. And so whether you're looking to increase cash flow, or whether you're looking to create a sellable, company, whether it's soon or, years to come, you're ready and you don't have to miss out on a potential, financial opportunity of a lifetime. And so I can either help all the way to the exit, or, just hold it as a cash cow and, help make sure that you can, continue doing the business that you love, and you're not just getting pulled into it, just repairing things all the time.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing. Dope. Well, let's close this baby out. Why don't you tell everybody who's watching, listening, whatever, how they can learn more about you, the Sellable Agency, follow your content. I see you posting some stuff on Instagram, which is super valuable. Where can people learn more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So on Instagram, it's at B_Watts21. So B for Brett _Watts, WATTS 21. On Facebook, it's Brett Watts. I'm sure there's more than one Brett Watts out there. The sellableagency.com. That's it. And then if you do want a resource on basically how to know how to get past any bottleneck by understanding the OKRs, the objectives, and what key results do you need in order to hit that, you can also go to the sellableagency.com/calculator. And I built out a dashboard that basically helps you identify the bottlenecks and exactly what metrics you need to do specific to your business, on how you can overcome and break past that revenue point. So yeah, I appreciate it, guys. This has been really fun.
Yeah, super.
Thanks for hopping on, man.
Absolutely.
All right, y'all.
Cool.